Right, hello everyone. So welcome to the O2 Financial Data Hub presentation. I'm John Ratcliff, so I work for O2 as a Managing Enterprise Architect, and my colleague here is Kieran Miller from Accenture, and this is a joint presentation between O2 and Accenture. And what we'd like to do initially is just play a quick corporate video just to show a bit of background and context around the Financial Data Hub, and then we'll introduce ourselves a bit more after that.
O2 is the UK brand of Telefonica, a leading global communications service provider. In the UK, O2 has over 25 million customers.
From the 1st of January 2018, there's a new accounting standard which has been released. It's called IFRS 15. That's all about revenue recognition. It's a huge challenge for us as a business, and we only had 12 months to be able to deliver this project.
Despite the challenging scenario, O2 saw the opportunity to go beyond the requirements for compliance to build something truly transformational.
The main challenge for the project was to deliver more with less, to make sure that we were, as a business, compliant to the regulation, but also to build a platform that would allow us to become a leading digital telco and deliver better customer service and satisfaction.
Working in partnership, Accenture and O2 planned and implemented the end-to-end delivery of the Finance Data Hub.
One of the main challenges was the complexity and the volume of data that we had to capture. We had to take data from 12 different source systems, and we've got 70 daily feeds, and we needed to know about each individual contract for IFRS 15.
We required inputs from O2 and a number of their third parties, including network, security, infrastructure, and the finance accounting team.
The team developed a groundbreaking hybrid big data architecture, leveraging mature products and innovative new technology.
So the Finance Data Hub was delivered on time, which has enabled us to comply with the accounting standards. Equally importantly for me is that it was on budget. The Finance Data Hub has brought three main benefits to us as a business. We got all our data from the source systems, and we've reconciled that back as well, so we've got over 99.9% accuracy.
One of the other benefits is that we have reporting available by 9 AM. It also enables us to be ready on working day one with our accounting, which means we've got more time for assurance rather than having to manually calculate things.
It also offers real business insights and value.
Overall, the result for O2 is that they've delivered a highly reconciled and fully automated financial data hub. It has enormous data processing capability and has future-proofed O2 for what they want to do next.
It was great to work with Accenture. They were a trusted partner.
They worked hand in hand, embedding themselves with my team and providing a range of skills from overall program management to data analytics to help us better deliver the right solution for the business.
It's enabled us to get robust, accurate, granular financial data, which will enable us to get better insight, better analysis, and ultimately better decisions for the business.
The Financial Data Hub will also be used to support new use cases in machine learning and artificial intelligence. This will create many new opportunities for us to deliver better service to our customers at O2.
It will enable us as a finance function to transform into the future.
Okay, so we can talk about now how we've managed to deliver the Finance Data Hub and kind of where we're going to take it next. So just as an introduction, I'm John Ratcliff. As I said, I'm a Managing Enterprise Architect within the business. I joined O2 3 years ago. I've got a team of 6 different architects working for me across data, BI, MV&O and finance functions. I'm a chartered engineer and chartered manager and a background in electrical engineering. I think we've just heard about Telefonica UK or O2, so we've got 25 million customers, one of 4 main operators in the UK. We run 2G, 3G, 4G networks, over 450 retail stores, and we do sponsorship around England Rugby and the O2.
Thanks, John. Great to speak to you today. My name is Kieran Miller. I'm from Accenture. I've been part of our analytics function within Accenture for the past 10 years. In case you're kind of not aware of Accenture, we are a professional services company. We provide services across strategy, consulting, digital and operations across a number of businesses, organisations and governments, helping them to become kind of truly high-performing businesses. Within O2, for the last 2 years, I've been working with John and the O2 team as the kind of end-to-end program manager for the Finance Data Hub, kind of bringing in my architecture and design background into it, and then kind of seeing it through from concept into run and operate. And it's been a really interesting and exciting project to deliver alongside O2 and Hortonworks. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about the background and where we found ourselves sort of 18 months ago with the project. The concept of a data hub had been spoken about at O2 for quite a long period of time before kind of even the Finance Data Hub and kind of the arrival of Accenture had taken place. The issue that kind of O2 were having is that the concept of a data hub and bringing together all the different sources and the data for insight was kind of one that was well supported but never really had the business case to make happen so that initial investment could take place. So O2 were very clever in using the IFRS 15 use case with a very substantial regulatory risk, 10% of all revenue for all companies who don't comply, to basically justify the spend on building a new data hub. So we needed to kind of achieve that compliance by January 2018, and therefore we kind of kicked off the project to do it. Alongside that, O2 were relying on a number of different kind of systems for their source data, both finance and transactional systems. The result of which was that to get to the correct numbers and to perform the month end each month, there was a lot of manual intervention, kind of manual cranking of numbers, comparisons between the different groups in order to get that kind of month end achieved. There was a view within O2 that kind of one size fits all, so there was no differentiation between a marketing and a finance and a consumer use case where the way in which they may view a customer life cycle would be different, or the way in which an average revenue would be measured. As already mentioned, there was a complex architecture. The self-serving reporting capability was kind of available but limited, and kind of a lot of the reporting was done centrally out of BI, who were running kind of hundreds of reports for the business day on day. And finally, there was an obvious understanding towards needing a business rule engine and data governance and a refresh of the data quality that we were looking to do. Before I kind of go into kind of what we did and what our objectives were, just very briefly on what the kind of IFRS 15 regulation is, and I'll summarize the next two slides. So in essence, the way telcos were reporting revenue was as part of your monthly subscription, they would report that as one single number. Whereas what the regulation for IFRS 15 requires is that you split that number into the services that you're providing, which for a telco is a physical mobile phone and a tariff that you're paying for monthly. So what we needed to do through this project in IFRS 15 was identify and split that revenue per how much you're paying for the handset and how much you're paying for the tariff, and then kind of track that over the period of time. The benefit for telcos is that they get to recognise a lot more revenue up front, because you can recognise the money that you're paying for your handset up front and then draw down on the services as you go through the duration of your contract. There's a kind of example here where you can see an upfront payment of £50 is paid. They pay £40 per month, but you need to recognise each of those slightly different. So the monthly tariff goes against the cost of the device, and then how much goes against the cost of the services. So in order to meet this, O2 recognised the fact that what they needed to do was change their source systems to provide one central hub. That central hub could then feed an IFRS 15 engine, and then that engine could perform the posting. So why build a finance data hub? I think the finance stakeholders would point to the top one being the kind of the key one, so a trusted data platform. A lot of the kind of background within O2 was who had the right number, which was the correct number for revenue month on month, who had the right number of subscribers. So at the end of the kind of delivery, we needed to ensure that everyone was on the same page in terms of the finance data hub was the correct number, and therefore we needed to have robust ways of checking and proving that our numbers are correct, that weren't just manually checking and the kind of time it takes to do that. It was an interesting time, kind of 18 months ago within O2, so there was a lot of work around future transformation activity. So what they were very keen to ensure was that we weren't taking a step through the finance data hub that would move us in a space where we weren't then able to strategically build. So they didn't want to build a pocket of architecture just for this particular use case. It needed to be a kind of platform for the future and a foundation. And then also the digital agenda and effective working. So as I talked upon in terms of the self-service reporting, O2 wanted to move more towards that space so that there was less emphasis on BI to be churning out reports on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, and certainly not the least, probably the most important in terms of the business case, we had to ensure we met IFRS 15 for the 1st of January 2018, and we had to ensure that future regulations like IFRS 16, which is now very much live and real, we could achieve through the hub. For those of you that have worked with finance, you'll know that they're a difficult bunch to work with in terms of the quality and the accuracy and ensuring that everything is correct. So what we did with finance is we kind of built 4 high-level success criteria to track our delivery and progress. It had to be highly accurate. An absolute non-negotiable in terms of both the project delivery and the contract was that the data within the finance data had to be 99.9% or higher accurate to source, which is a very high level of regulation and accuracy that we needed to provide. We had to provide for finance end-to-end lineage, so a number of audits and checks take place across the finance data that at the time of writing took time for the finance team to pull together and respond to, and often it would be a manual exercise to check where a particular attribute or particular field was coming from. So as part of this project, they needed to have true end-to-end lineage from the very source file through to the end report, and John will talk about how that was achieved a little bit later. Obviously, we needed to meet month-end accounting and the IFRS 15 compliance. The key thing around the month-end accounting was to bring forward the day in which the numbers were ready for posting. So previously, O2 were getting their data at the earliest on working day 2 for kind of review and checks. What we needed to do with the Finance Data Hub was make that working day 1, but critically also provide a view of the GL day on day. So often when the data was arriving on working day 2, there would then be a couple of days of analysis to check what had happened in the previous month and to fix the issues that had been created within that month. With what we delivered, we needed to provide a view of that on an ongoing basis, so it wasn't that kind of month-end shock each time we came to it. And finally, we needed to deliver the data and the reports by 9 AM each day. It's not just a kind of one-off, once-a-month activity for the accounting processes. It needed to have that data there and the reports there on a day-to-day basis for the ad hoc reporting and the ad hoc analytics. So in terms of us setting up the project, one thing that we needed to do, given the fact that this was finance, it was regulation, and it had a hard stop of January the 1st, 2018, is we had to ensure that using an open source product from Hortonworks was going to provide each of these success criteria. So what we did against each one of these, and through a kind of steerco governance, is we actually ran a POC ahead of actual real data to ensure that we could achieve the results. So for highly accurate, we took 2 months worth of production data, scrambled it, ran it through some kind of very simple graphs and processes, loading it into HDFS to ensure that it would load. And we'll talk more about the architecture in a second. But we ran that, proved it could work, proved that we could get to 99.9% on those months, and then kind of entered into build. Similarly with end-to-end lineage, we proved that by taking a source file, you'll see in a second that we have a hybrid architecture. We proved that we could kind of see that end-to-end lineage end-to-end. Month-end accounting and compliance, very much linked to the highly accurate. We were just proving that we could actually do that reference data and metadata around the GL codes, and they could be added as part of our processing through before we went into full productionization mode. And in terms of the ability to report by 9 AM, this really focused on our solution, which uses MicroStrategy, which is O2's preferred reporting tool, and ensuring that MicroStrategy and the Hadoop cluster could talk to each other in a kind of efficient and performant method. So those we used, we tracked those within Steerco, and kind of we got the green light to take quite an ambitious step, given the regulation, again, given the timeline, to kind of use what for O2 was a brand new architecture. I'll hand over to John, who's just going to talk more about the architecture and the kind of technology behind it. And John.
Okay, thanks, Kieran. So if we now look at the technology problem to be addressed, we've got the requirements from the business stakeholders in terms of finance, which Kieran's just gone through. So you can see there it's a very simplified architecture diagram where we've got three main data stores. So the top one being our Teradata data warehouse, and that has been in the business for 9 years or so. So that's very mature, very marketing focused. All the business rules and logic are based on marketing. So finance weren't against using that data, but again, based on the amount of accuracy and the compliance and auditability, we needed to either update that information to put extra checks in, extra processing power to get that data in time, or we went down the route that we did, which we'll go through in a bit of detail in a minute. We also had a legacy finance MIS, or Management Information System, and that was based on Oracle, and that was something that was developed over time. So, you know, that was something that had the reconciliation, proper auditability, but again, it was very complicated, very difficult to do updates and changes because that had been developed over many years. And then we had separate data marts, so these were feeds into commissions platforms or other platforms for specific individual business requirements. We had, you can see there, many sources to many stores, so we had different versions of the truth, and then lots of manual intervention to simplify that. And we needed a lot of time to prepare and validate the data. So the data was accurate, but it was a lot of kind of manual processing and lots of people's time to get that ready. Okay, so what was the short-term vision in terms of the Finance Data Hub? So again, it's to simplify the number of sources into a single hub. So you can see there the data marts and the old finance MIS system has been replaced by what we're calling as the Finance Data Hub today. We're leveraging the kind of business rules that exist and kind of building on those for the IRFS 15 standard. We want to eventually get to a common business rule model across the whole organisation. So we're seeing this as a kind of first step to bring that data together and start building those common business rules. Simplifying the process and technology. So again, we're removing legacy systems, which are becoming kind of out of date. They're still in support, but you know we need to look at moving those. And then we want to deploy that, or we have deployed that across or alongside the data warehouse. So at this stage, and this is kind of where we are at the moment, and I'll go into a bit more detail, we're kind of running this in parallel with the data warehouse. Kind of the long-term vision, and you'll see here now that the actual Enterprise Data Hub feeds the data warehouse. So this is where we're moving to next. So this is the latest step that we're looking at kind of planning and deploying over the next year or so. We've literally feeding all our data through NiFi or HDF. So everything will go through a single file transfer ETL mechanism to be loaded into what we're calling the Enterprise Data Hub. So it's no longer just for finance. So we've expanded it out, and we're looking at expanding that to double or 3 times the size, to then be able to store all the data in one place. And again, I'll talk about that in a bit of time. We still feel that Teradata's got a place within the architecture. So we've done a lot of research, spoken to a lot of experts within industry and the software vendors, and we still feel that the two environments stay together. The Hortonworks, or the open source piece, isn't quite ready enough to replace the data warehouse completely. Okay, so if we just look at the solution principles in a bit more detail. So what we've done, and again I'll go into a bit more detail in the architecture in a couple of slides' time, we've actually introduced the open source technology alongside some of existing technology. So we have Ab Initio. I don't know if people have heard of Ab Initio, but that's our standard ETL tool of choice within the business. And that loads data into the data warehouse today. So what we've done is we've actually extended that to work alongside or with Hortonworks. So we're using Ab Initio on the edge nodes of the data lake to load that data in and do that processing. We've built the platform so it's fully scalable. So we work with Telefonica Group, so we're part of the Telefonica Group, and we've worked with them to kind of build strategic building blocks or blocks that we can expand further. So we'll do that again in the next stage of development. And then we're also looking, as I say, using Hortonworks data flow, NiFi for all data loading. So today we're using scripts and different methods to bring data into the data warehouse, whereas we're seeing that HDF is a lot simpler and a lot quicker to bring that data in.
So just to cover on the daily reconciliation to source. So I mentioned this earlier. So this was a fairly unique solution that I hadn't previously seen before coming to O2 that we implemented. So to meet the requirement of ensuring that every day we know that the FDH is accurate, what we've done is that each source system, independently from our FDH code or their FDH files, generates a kind of control file or a file that provides key metrics that we then reconcile against. So the concept is not actually one that's only to be used for the Finance Data Hub, it's one that can be used across the O2 architecture for any source system to feed in a metric for that comparison. So if you take the billing system at O2, that's providing us a daily file which provides total number of billed records, the total revenue, and revenue split per product. We take that, we load it into our reconciliation database, and we produce a very similar file from the FDH. It's the same format, same structure, and it loads straight into that generic loader and straight into the database. What we then have is a series of dashboards that then compare that day on day, sends automated emails to the business community to show that that's reconciling, and also in cases where there are issues, it flags it to the kind of run and operate team first so that they can investigate whether it's an issue with the FDH number, whether there's been some problem in the processing, or whether actually there's just an issue on that particular day in the source system. What it also allows us to do is it doesn't just provide us that view day on whether we've loaded successfully and whether that day looks correct. We also compare month on month. So when we were talking earlier about the checking of the GL codes and checking to make sure that a month is correct before you get to the month end, month on month we can check that the revenue looks sensible. So for example, if on the first Saturday of most months you have a good revenue day because most people have been paid and they then therefore use their phone on the Saturday, you can check that you're seeing that similar trend month on month and investigate where there's problems. And throughout the course of the kind of run and operate already of this, we've seen countless examples where we've spotted an issue in one of the billing systems that has then required a kind of source system intervention to correct. So that's working and it's really kind of met that requirement. The other one around end-to-end lineage, so the solution here was to use the Ab Initio metadata hub, and John will talk through the kind of considerations behind that. But what that's doing is that's taking all of the data out of the source system, out of NiFi in relation to the source files and the attributes within it, and then mapping that in a very kind of user-friendly graphical user interface that kind of the run and operate teams and key users within the business can then interrogate. So if we do get a question from an auditor around, where is your revenue excluding VAT coming from, we can answer very, very quickly exactly where that attribute's coming from and respond in a quicker period of time than we could previously. And I think finally, it's been kind of a topic throughout the conference, hasn't it? Utilization of the cloud. So because this was a brand new infrastructure for O2, there was a lead time for procurement and infrastructure activities to take place to actually deliver the physical infrastructure. O2 went completely physical with this end solution. And again, John will talk through some of the principles around that in a second. But what we did is to avoid program delays given the deadlines on this program, we actually spun up the Accenture Insights platform known as AIP to provide an out-of-the-box kind of mimic of the O2 architecture so that we could do build test and reconciliation test in the cloud. So that's where we've kind of used the cloud to kind of enable the delivery, speed up delivery, but also kind of kept within the O2 security policy and kind of keeping that kind of data secure once live within the production environment. And I think if we hadn't kind of pulled the lever to use a kind of cloud environment, we probably would have lost somewhere between 4 to 5 months in the kind of end-to-end delivery cycle. So we kind of went live in August 2017. So it was, if we had added another 5 months, it would have got very tense around the January 18 go live. So those are the solution principles. And then I think just to dive deeper into the technology selections and the considerations, I'll hand back to John.
Okay, thanks, Kieran. So again, as I mentioned before, we've kind of adopted a hybrid approach in terms of using the open source technology as well as our existing tools. And that was done on purpose in terms of understanding and having skills internally in terms of running those tools. So we've got teams that use Atacama for reference data management and can use those tools well. So we wanted to roll out and make use of that. In terms of using Ab Initio, so Ab Initio and I don't know how many people have heard of it, but it's a very good ETL lineage tool, but very expensive. So you pay for good quality, skilled architects, skilled designers for a tool as as good as that, but you wouldn't normally kind of adopt that with an open source solution. So we did some work around how we actually adopt those two technologies together, and I think we did some made some good progress in using Ab Initio on the edge nodes of the data lake to be able to move data in and out and do the processing. Now, part of that was to kind of meet the requirements of the business users. So we're not trying something completely new, completely high risk from our point of view without our skills. So we kind of got them on board to say, well, actually, we're going to adopt Hortonworks Hadoop to store the data and to roll the data up. But we were also going to use our existing tools where we've proven to them that we have that skill and ability. Now, to be fair, when we spoke to Hortonworks probably 2 years ago when we started this program, some of the requirements we had around reference data and lineage and ETL weren't part of HDP, whereas now they probably are, or they are, from what we can see. So going forwards, we are going to review the design and say, well, actually, can we kind of do another hybrid or replace some of the existing tools to move to a more open source kind of model? I think Kieran's already mentioned about MicroStrategy. So again, that we have a big license across the organisation. So we already base that on top of our data warehouse. Every user in the company's got access to that. So we just reuse that requirement or that capability for reporting. Yeah, cheers. And just to mention, so the other thing just to mention, just checking the notes, so just around, I didn't mention NiFi on that previous slide. So again, we're using HDF to load all data, which is a massive improvement for us instead of using code to load data into the environment. Okay. So here again is a bit more detail into the solution. And I've mentioned the kind of Hadoop, HDFS, Ab Initio mix. So we've got lots of source systems on the left there, and again, I should have probably said this. These are kind of the customer finance systems. So we also have an equivalent environment for our network side. So this is, this doesn't include all our huge volume of network data, which is also running on a different cluster. So we're taking in all the data from a kind of finance customer CRM perspective, loading that through NiFi into HDFS in a raw format, and again that allows us to go back to source and check that data if we need to. We're then using Ab Initio on the edge nodes to kind of do the ETL, conforming the data, so we're kind of making sense of the data and bringing the different sources together. And then we're using, I suppose, Ab Initio and Hive to kind of roll that data up into an aggregate, and that's what gets reported and sent to downstream systems. So again, you can see it's quite a hybrid approach. It works quite well with Ab Initio on the edge nodes because we haven't got the huge volumes of data. Now, if we had large volumes of data, then that just wouldn't work because we wouldn't want to shift the data between the data nodes and the edge nodes. But for the purpose of the finance perspective, it's very good. Just to mention the reconciliation database, so again, for checks and reconciling back to source systems, so that sits there as well. And we've got full lineage end-to-end. So again, we can look from source to report to downstream system to see what's going on with the data.
Okay, so in terms of the business value created and the outcomes, so we talked through the kind of 4 proof points earlier. So the fantastic news was we did achieve the IFRS 15 compliance, which was of much relief to me personally and to all of O2 in terms of making sure that we met that deadline. I think that was the non-negotiable, I guess. The good news is that all the other kind of points we also were able to achieve. So we now support the posting of kind of vast amounts of revenue each month end, and we're doing that within working day 1. So because of the fact that every single day of the month they can be checking what their GL codes are looking like and comparing it to the previous month or the previous year, that allows them to very, very quickly on working day 1 know that their numbers are correct and post it into ERP, which is just a complete different world to where they were previously, where it was just the first time they saw it was on that kind of working day 2. So in terms of the finance team, they're incredibly pleased with that outcome, and that's kind of been a real success story. The hybrid architecture has achieved everything it was supposed to achieve, so it's processing 20 million records per day. It's fully reconciled, it's audited to the source systems, and it meets that 99.9% accuracy requirement. and that's achieved through those dashboards on the reconciliation database. And then, crucially for myself and John and everything that we're doing between O2 and Accenture and Hortonworks in the future, what we're able to do is provide that platform for now building out into more use cases, so more than just the finance use cases. And you've seen that in the way that the language has changed from calling it a finance data hub to now calling it the enterprise data hub or the strategic data hub. And that's because we're going to start adding more and more use cases into the data hub, and that's our kind of next step. So this next generation hybrid architecture really has created that foundation for kind of data and analytics exploitation. And I'm going to hand back to John finally now just to talk through what that architecture is going to look like.
Okay, so this takes it to the next stage, and we've really got this in plan, so we're actually looking at deploying this in the next couple of years. So if you can recall back to the previous slide, you can see the finance data hub kind of layers still exist, but we'll treat that as a separate data product. Now, one of the differences here with the current finance data hub is that it's quite locked down. So, it's fully productionized, fully IT supported, and we don't have data scientists accessing that data or that environment today. So one of the things we've got to do is start looking at new rules using, Ranger and some of the other tools to be able to open that environment so our data scientists can start, using it and exploiting it for the technology that it is. But then also, as I said, expand the data lake or the enterprise data lake so we can, get more data. I mean, one of our first principles is that all data must land in the same place from a kind of customer stroke CRM perspective. So that means we can join the data and people can run new insights. Now, just to give you a few stats on the current environment, just for those that are interested, we've got a total of 4 environments. So as part of the business requirements, the business user actually wanted a full DR system. So, it's something you wouldn't necessarily deploy as part of a Hadoop, deployment or instance. But we've actually got full DR across two different sites and a daily kind of aggregation or load of that data across those environments. In terms of this environment, we're not looking at doing that. So we'll still protect the DR from a finance data hub perspective, but for the kind of marketing and other use cases, we'll keep that as a separate instance kind of logically, and we won't replicate that data across those environments. You can see at the bottom there, I've mentioned we've still got Teradata, and we see that we're going to have Teradata for a long time. We've just invested in a brand new Teradata system, and that will be used kind of for what it's good for. So using to provide reports and run queries on the fly for the majority of the business users. We don't expect our data scientists to hit Teradata as they do today. So they use Teradata, use sandboxes, and we want to kind of separate that reporting analytics from a Teradata big data environment. So just a few other considerations, and again, some of these have probably been heard already, just from our perspective. We say we've got 2 big data lakes within O2. I've mentioned, obviously, the Finance Data Hub one. And the reason it's worked for us is that it's been built on a specific use case. So we haven't just kind of put a data lake in and then said, we just chuck data and see if it's got value. Because we've learned from other organisations and we've heard at other conferences that people that do that, yeah, great, but if you can't find the killer use case or the value in that data, then you don't continue building that forward. So we have a solid foundation from a finance perspective that the data lake will last for some time, and we can build on that. And it's the same from our network side. So again, I haven't listed it on there, but there's lots of value on the network environment, and they've got some good use cases they're building out. That's good. One of the things that worked for us, so we had Accenture as our partner, but we also used Hortonworks an awful lot. So again, using Hadoop and the open source technology was completely new. We didn't have the internal skills. We didn't know how to size the environments. We didn't know how to install the software. So Hortonworks have helped a lot with that. So their team were quite fundamental in helping us actually deliver the finance data hub as it is today. They also provided architecture guidance and so forth. And then finally, just in terms of just the clouds. So in terms of our cloud hosting policy, and this isn't the same across all applications or systems within the business, but primarily this is the kind of principle we're using for the data side of things. Kieran mentioned that it takes a lot of time for us to actually deploy new hardware. So we have our own data centers, our own suppliers for the hardware, but it actually takes quite long to set that kind of that technology up. So we used the cloud for kind of dev test from a Accenture perspective initially, and that kind of accelerated our delivery. But our actual finance data hub is on premise, and I think going forwards we'll still continue to build that out on premise, so not look at kind of a hybrid approach across both. Within the business, there's obviously a lot of focus on cost saving and making the best use of the money we have to deploy new technologies and new features. So you've got to weigh up whether you want to do a capex purchase, i.e. buy the hardware, install it and manage it, or do you want to go for an opex purchase and then deploy in the cloud. For the purpose of finance data hub, so the second point on there, we didn't have any movement of data required, although going forwards with the kind of future architecture, we're potentially looking at, we will be loading data from the enterprise data hub into Teradata, so there'll be a lot of movement of that data from one system to another. We didn't have any elastic processing or storage requirements. So again, we kind of knew and dimensioned the finance data hub based on the standards that we already knew, so we could build that environment out, so we didn't have to expand quickly or for short periods of time. I mentioned speed of setup already, and then I suppose the only other point to mention there is we're very tight on security and data residency for our data for our customers. So again, I'm not saying the cloud isn't secure, but again, if we keep our data in our own data centers and comply to our own standards, then we know we're protecting our customer data. Cool. And so with that, are there any specific questions? Yeah.
Do you use your data hub only for financial data or for other data segments
Okay.
as well? And do you allow your data analysts or data scientists to use it, or do they have another platform for their specific needs?
Okay, so the question was, do we use the data hub for finance only, and do we open that up for other users? So I think, just to reiterate, I mentioned two environments. So we have the finance data hub environment, which is purely for finance data today, although we're looking at opening it up and loading more data in for analysts. And then on the other side, or not the other side, but another part of the business, we have a network big data environment where analysts and data scientists really go in looking for customer experience metrics and building stuff. So, and we see the two environments kind of working alongside each other going forwards. I suppose the only other thing to mention is Teradata. So Teradata today is used by a lot of analysts using SAS and other SQL-based queries to actually do their analytics in sandboxes. So again, we want to move away from using Teradata for that, open up the finance data hub and move those users onto the hub going forwards. Does that answer the question, yeah? Yeah.
Like that, I think we're working with Portworx at the moment as to how best to open it up and make that data available for a wider audience. So yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yep.
The question is about reconciliation. So this is one of the most sensitive and doesn't work.
I can see him plugging it in. Try it now.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, the question is about reconciliation. It's one of the sensitive moments in financial data hub. Could you tell me how your end users work with the results of reconciliation? You mentioned about emails, like monitoring system, and the question is about your future. What do you think about how do you plan to make it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it makes total sense that I take that as the guy looking after the run and operate at the moment. So the way the process works at the moment is, so if an error is detected, it will kind of email an alert, and in a case of a serious kind of red issue, it will send SMSs to the appropriate support team to investigate. If they look at that and go, this is going to need a couple of hours to check it and investigate what's required, we then send a kind of holding email to all of the kind of distribution lists that use the data hub to say, this is our kind of, the service is delayed, please bear with us for a couple of hours, which doesn't happen very often, but probably in the first 6 months, probably has been sent 6 times or something like that, that there's that kind of discrepancy. at the moment, it is kind of a dashboard that they need to load themselves within MicroStrategy to see that. What we want to do is move away from that kind of like push out communication into more of a, actually when they log into the MicroStrategy Cube, it will automatically pop up the dashboard for that particular day and will allow them to see the issue. In terms of then investigating it, the kind of data scientists or the analysts in the finance side and the accountants will then work with the kind of dedicated data hub team to say, I agree that the FDH number looks correct and the source looks wrong, or they would say, no, actually, I think the source is correct and you've probably got an issue in your processing. So the emphasis is more on the run and operate team to investigate it and fix it, but the business will be involved in that kind of conversation and transaction to say where they think the problem is. Does that address your question? Thank you.
Cool. I think we had a question here, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. A question about your data sources. Are they part of the data lake by being an edge node, or are they really outside your data lake? And are they responsible for pushing the data to your data lake?
So yes, all the data sources are outside the data lake, and there's a mix of pushing the data through NiFi from the sources, or the data lake pulling from the sources. So there's kind of a mix between the two. I think going forwards, we're also looking at simplifying a lot of the different source systems. So when we've done that simplification, then we'll look at how we load that data in.
I think that's where NiFi has really helped, isn't it? Because whereas previously you'd have a number of fairly bespoke FTP methods for bringing the data in, basically for us not really being able to find out which one was the right answer for this solution, we found NiFi and implemented it as a brand new solution. So I think that's really helped in terms of a bit of a mix of where the source systems are. Some are in cloud, some are on premise, some are fairly old kit. Having that one consolidation within NiFi to ingest it has been a real bonus.
Thanks.
Any other questions? No, so with that, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your time.